So, good morning everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the threats to coral reefs, particularly on marine debris and illegal harvesting and trade, especially in the Anthropocene epoch wherein humans are the one driving changes in the environment. So, we'll see how marine debris and illegal harvest and trade affects coral population. So, I'll start by my brief introduction. So, human-caused or anthropogenic activities are major threats to coral reefs. Pollution, overfishing, destructive fishing practices using dynamite or cyanide, collecting live corals for the aquarium market, mining coral for building materials, and the warming climate are some of the many ways that people damage reef all around the world every day. One of the most significant threats to reef is pollution. Land-based runoff and pollutant discharges can result from dredging, coastal development, agricultural and deforestation activities, and sewage treatment plant operations. These runoff may contain sediments, nutrients, chemicals, insecticides, oil, and debris. When some pollutants enter the water, nutrient levels can increase, promoting the rapid growth of algae and other organisms that can smother corals. Coral reefs are also affected by leaking fuels, anti-fouling paints and coatings, and other chemicals that enter the water. Petroleum spills do not always appear to affect corals directly because the oil usually stays near the surface of the water, and much of it evaporates into the atmosphere within days. However, if an oil spill occurs while corals are spawning, the eggs, sperm, and sperm can be damaged as they float near the surface before they fertilized and settle. So in addition to compromising water quality, oil pollution can disrupt the reproductive success of corals, making them vulnerable to other types of disturbances. In many areas, coral reefs are destroyed when coral heads and brightly colored reef fishes are collected for the aquarium and jewelry trade. Careless or untrained divers can trample fragile corals, and many of the fishing techniques can be destructive too. In blast fishing, dynamite or other heavy explosives are detonated to startle fish out of hiding places. This practice indiscriminately kills other species and can crack and stress corals so much that they expel their zooxanthellae. As a result, large sections of reefs can be destroyed. So, in my next slide, which is the marine debris, I think that marine debris is an intergenerational responsibility. When we say intergenerational responsibility, we all have the responsibility, the old, the young, and the children have the responsibility to take care of this problem, to take action of this problem. Not everyone, because through our collective effort, I think we can solve and find meaningful solutions to this existing problem. With that said, I'll be presenting to you some of the problems that some countries face, especially on their coral reef populations. In the Gulf of Mannar, which is one of India's only four major coral reef formations, marine debris has been turning up on corals for some time now. In their diving and snorkeling surveys, they found that ghost nets, fishing traps, ropes, lines, and other debris were indeed present in some patches. These marine debris swathed both live and dead coral colonies, and more than 40% of all debris were ghost nets. As a definition, marine debris is described as any material that is made or processed and then thrown or abandoned into the marine environment, whether purposely or inadvertently. So, either you accidentally throw your garbage or intentionally dump your waste in the ocean, It is considered as marine debris. So marine debris can have significant impacts, especially negative impacts on the marine environment and the marine animals that live in it. I'll be discussing in the next slide. So in this slide, we'll have to tackle some of the effects of marine debris on coral reefs. First is the marine debris comes from waste from the uplands. Most of the waste produced by humans end up in the ocean. So garbage wasted into the sea, washed from the sea into the from the item on the land. So we have some garbages coming from the dump sites, and people in the coastal communities but often have this idea that the sea is a garbage site. So we can clearly see that in some coastal communities or some rural areas where people are concentrated near shore, and most of their waste are dumped into the ocean. Not only are the coastal communities responsible for the dumping of the waste into the ocean, but also people from the highlands or the uplands contribute to the pollution. So next is the fishing nets. Fishing nets that have been lost or discarded by commercial fishing vessels, otherwise known as ghost nets. So when they fish, some of the ghost nets that are accidentally thrown or purposely thrown into the ocean are termed as ghost nets. So these ghost nets eventually entangle fish species or other marine animals, which may in turn injure or kill them eventually. Next is the ship and plane wrecks. So ship and plane wrecks from battles and bombing raids that often release toxic paints and chemicals into the marine environment. So ship and plane wrecks are also contribute to the pollution in the marine environment. Although there have been documented there have been documented on shipwrecks where corals coral colonies grow, and then fish eventually migrate into that place to live in the shipwreck. But overall, plane and shipwrecks contribute to the pollution. So with that said, I've written an essay. So, a growing population, increasing urbanization, and a shift to a consumer lifestyle are leading to the generation of ever great volumes of solid waste around the world. When our waste isn't managed properly, it can end up in drains and rivers, and eventually makes its way to the sea. So, fun fact, more than 90% of the plastic in the sea comes from land-based sources. So that's very large quantity or percentage of the plastic that ends up in the sea. So how are these garbages garbages regulated or cleaned up in the ocean? They're not cleaned up. They get digested, consumed, broken down, and they also injure marine animals. Overall, mismanaged household and business waste in lower income countries probably accounts for 50 to 70% by weight of plastics entering the oceans. So this is actually proven in a study published in the Science Direct. So mismanaged household has typically been one of the reasons why countries accounts for like 50 or 70% of weight of plastics. One of the harmful effects of garbages to corals is that they strangle and choke marine life. So anything that lives in the coral communities, such as fishes and marine turtles, can get entangled by plastics or nets or ghost nets, as they say. So free-floating nets and rubbish may be lethal to marine life, suffocate, entangle, and kill corals, fish, sharks, sea turtles, and marine mammals. Sea turtles often mistake plastic bags for jellyfish and consume them, dying as a consequence. So, this is very unfortunate in the sense that some sea turtles think that um, plastic bags are jellyfish. So they have they have no conscience on or awareness that that is a plastic bag. So the plastic bag isn't digested in the turtle's stomach. So what will happen is that it will cause disturbances in its digestive system, which will eventually affect his feeding behavior and will most likely end up in a severe situation. So entanglement of marine life is a global problem that results in the death of hundreds of thousands of marine mammals and sea turtles worldwide every year. Entangled animals may drown or starve because they are restricted by fishing gear, or they may suffer physical trauma and infections from the gear cutting into their flesh. Entangled animals may also be unable to avoid vessels like they normally would, thus increasing the risk of vessel strikes. Smaller marine animals like sea turtles, seals, porpoises, dolphins, and smaller whales may drown immediately if the gear is large and or heavy. Large whales can typically pull gear or parts of it off the ocean floor and are generally not at immediate risk of drowning, but they also face risk from exhaustion and infection. Entanglement is considered a primary cause of human-caused mortality in many whale species, especially right whales, humpback whales, and gray whales. As someone who studies marine mammals in Sarangani Bay Protected Seascape, I've seen some plastic bags floating into the ocean surface, and it's quite alarming for me as a marine biologist to see plastic bags floating into the ocean surface. Might as well because some cetaceans or we have many cetaceans that are documented within the bay, and we have the responsibility to take care of their habitats because they also provide ecological benefits for us humans, not only for the recreational activities but also some of the ecological processes like balancing the ecosystem. They're very crucial animal species, and we have the responsibility as people or as sarangans living or living in the Sarangani Bay to protect them. So another adverse effect of marine debris into the marine life is that it spreads alien species. So alien or non-native organisms adhering to marine debris are sometimes carried great distances from their origin and introduced into distant reefs, causing ecological disruption. So I have here represented the lionfish because this fish species is one of the most invasive fish species around the world. Although it cannot be uh, driven by plastic, or it cannot ride in the current together with the plastic, but it clearly represents how invasive species destroy reef ecosystems. So I have read a research about how plastics help in the migration of alien species from one habitat to another habitat. Um, That review addresses an integrated analysis of the different factors involved in the impact of plastic as a vector, meaning as something that is used for transportation. So as a vector for the dispersal of marine species. The sources of entry of plastic materials into the ocean are identified as well as how they move between different habitats, affecting each trophic level and producing hotspots of plastic accumulation in the ocean. The characterization of plastic as a dispersal vector for marine species has provided information about the inherent properties of plastics which have led to its impact on the ocean. Persistence, buoyancy, and variety in terms of chemical composition, all of which facilitate colonization by macro and microscopic species along with its dispersion throughout different oceans and ecosystems. The study of the differences in the biocolonization of plastic debris according to its chemical composition provided fundamental information regarding the invasion process mediated by plastic and highlighted gaps of knowledge about this process. A wide range of species attached to plastic materials has been documented, and the most recurrent phyla found on plastic have been identified from potentially invasive macrofauna to toxic microorganisms, which are capable of causing great damage in places far away from their origin. Plastic seems to be more efficient than the natural oceanic rafts carrying taxa such as arthropoda, annelida, and mollusca. Although the different colonization of different plastic polymers is not clear, the chemical composition might determine the community of microorganisms where we can find both pathogens and virulent and antibiotic resistance genes. So, the properties of plastic allow it to be widely dispersed in practically all ocean compartments, making this material an effective means of transport for any species that could become invasive. So this is what I said, that plastic is actually can be a hotspot for species dispersal. It is kind of like giving them some kind of home or cozy home while traveling from the place of origin to their target point location. Another adverse impact of plastic is that it reduces the beauty of the location. Garbage may also degrade the attractiveness of beaches and coral reefs, diminishing a destination's attraction to visitors. This may result in huge economic losses for coastal communities that rely on tourism. So as you can see, you, in the picture, it depicts that some of the plastics are um, are accumulated together with some woods and biodegradable materials. As someone who wants to travel all the time to beaches, it kind of like discouraging to see plastics laid into the ocean or into the beach sand. So um, it's really quite making tourists very discouraged. So it is not a rare sight to go to a beach these days to only find plastic strewn about everywhere. What is worse is to see such a situation and not be faced by it all. This unpleasant sight of seeing our natural landscapes polluted by plastic on beaches is now so common that we have almost accepted it as our lives. But you know what? Sometimes we just have to take matters in our own hands and try to make a difference, because you know how our actions may influence others and cause a chain reaction of positive events that will make a bigger impact. So I highly recommend those people or students who initiate coastal cleanups. This will not only clean our beaches, but it will also help the corals to not be choked or trampled by any marine debris that may cause their photosynthesis or feeding activities, or that may not burden their photosynthesis or feeding activities and not damage their physical appearance or morphological traits, something like that. Not only that marine debris strangles marine life and makes beautiful beaches ugly, corals are also used by people for construction. They are mined for limestone and construction materials. Sometimes coral pieces are removed for use as bricks or road fill. Sand and limestone from coral reefs are also made into cement for new buildings. This is actually a trap because coral rock is a rubbly limestone composed of ancient coral reef material, as you can see in this photo. These bricks are made of corals, dead corals. The term also refers to the building blocks quarried from these strata, which are an important local building materials in areas such as on the coast of East Africa and the southeastern United States. Coral stones extracted from areas such as the Gulf of Mannar in India are used as building blocks or in road construction and as a source of material for house decorations. Similarly, in West Sumatra, branching and massive corals are extracted to sell as decorative materials for house walls. This is quite alarming because some corals take millions of years to grow, and then these people are actually having destructive extraction for coral reefs, and as a result, the home or the ecosystem are staggered or will not function well because some species are are slowly diminishing or are slowly on the brink of extinction. We have to stop collecting corals and make them as ornaments in our homes, and um, we have to be very responsible of our actions and consider not only of our needs but also for the needs of other people which are really dependent on corals for food and for their income or source of income. So we have to be responsible. In consonant to the bricks, to the corals used as brick walls, corals may also be used for souvenirs and jewelry. So some traditions or people in other parts of the world collect corals to make them as ornaments for themselves or as something like souvenirs and jewelry. It says that coral species are used in the dried ornaments trade industry, ornamental, where they are collected and traded for souvenirs and jewelry. According to one study, Indonesia supplies 95% of the world's coral trade, while the United States imports 85% of the dead coral and 98% of the live coral. So, corals have long been popular as souvenirs for home decor and in jewelry, but many consumers are unaware of these beautiful structures are made by living creatures. Fewer still realize that corals are dying off at alarming rates around the world. And like as I said earlier, it takes millions of years before they can grow into full size or like they can really colonize one community. Commercial harvesting to satisfy the demand for coral jewelry has reduced colony size, density, and age structure of some colarium species over time. Harvesting is also lowering the reproduction capability of these species and is decreasing its genetic diversity. Research indicates that removal of red and pink corals for the global jewelry and art trade is also leading to smaller and smaller corallium in the wild. Corals grow very slowly, are extremely long-lived, and take years to reach maturity. Yeah, it takes decades or longer to create reef structures. Once coral is harvested, especially when it's extracted at a young age, surrounding coral beds often do not recover. That's why it's best to leave corals and other marine life on the reef. Remember, corals are already a gift. Don't give them as presents. So there's this saying that when you see a beautiful flower, instead of plucking it or like cutting its stem and giving it to someone you love, you're just gonna share it with him or like uh, go go with him and then let him see the beauty of these wildflowers. So that's what makes aesthetic beauty of nature beneficial for our mental health also. Another sad story of the coral reef decline is that of the aquarium trade. So coral, fishes, and live rocks such as dead corals, rock covered with encrusting organisms such as algae and sponges are collected for the marine aquarium industry. In addition to living coral and live rock, millions of coral reef species are harvested every year from around the world to support the aquarium industry. Experts estimate that 95% of the fish sold in the saltwater aquarium trade are wild caught. So the global aquarium trade is decimating reefs around the world, with 1 in 10 fish actually surviving the supply chain as far as the high street shops. Many then die in the first 24 hours when they arrive at the hobbyist's home. Many of these fish are caught using cyanide, which stuns the fish so that they are easily caught. The use of cyanide to supply their live reef fish trade is illegal, yet it is one of the main threats to coral reefs around the Indo-Pacific. Indonesia and the Philippines are the two of the largest suppliers to the global marine aquarium trade, and cyanide is widely documented as the popular catch method. Involved in the wild capture of over 1,800 species of fish and approximately 1,000 species of invertebrates from more than 40 countries. The marine aquarium trade is viewed by many as a threat to coral reef conservation. There are concerns as to whether demands of species from families Acanthuridae, such as certain fish, and Labridae, like the wrasses, and many invertebrate taxa exceed sustainability. So they have already exceeded the sustainability of collecting these species. Less than 10% of marine aquarium trade livestock is cultured. The freshwater aquarium trade, in contrast, consists of about 90% commercially aquacultured species. This is quite problematic. Problematic in the sense that we are removing the habitats of some species from the ocean and relegating or relishing its beauty in our homes. Isn't that kind of selfish? You want something for yourself and not for others. I hope we educate people on the importance of coral reefs, especially on the populations of fishes such as the surgeonfish and wrasses, where they help in the ecological balancing in the marine environment. But I guess that we need to have strict regulations and implementation of our laws, especially on the regulating on the collection of fishes, reef fishes, as well as the coral reefs, so that we can protect them in ways that we know we can. There are really many ways to protect them. It's just that we never really had a good regulating team or regulation. Coral reefs are also used as medicines. So, coral reef species are collected for Eastern medicine, such as seahorses, and Western medicine for coral used for bone grafts. So, medicines can be derived from a variety of coral reef organisms, including hard corals, gorgonians, and others. Many organisms also found in reefs produce chemical compounds that have been used in treatments for cardiovascular diseases, ulcers, leukemia, lymphoma, and skin cancer, and many more remain undiscovered. More than half of all new cancer drug research focuses on marine organisms, many of which can be found in coral reefs. There is still much to be understood about coral reef organisms, and scientists believe that there is still a wealth of medical knowledge that remains undiscovered. Preserving coral reefs will likely lead to future medical breakthroughs. So, we have this called sustainable extraction, where you can use species to treat medication. So, in the medical industry, I think that they are practicing um, regulation of collecting species for medical purposes, because if they don't follow such strict protocols, eventually the species will be wiped out because of the great demands of the people that needs that medicine. So I suggest that um, medical practitioners like doctors, nurses, and pharmacists also try to understand that corals need to be preserved um, and protected for us, for the future generations to benefit. So this is actually the end of my report, and as much as I want to share more of my thoughts about this topic, I would like to just say that um, apathy is the greatest environmental problem that we are facing. Especially people who don't. Apathy is actually not taking. You know something that you know it's happening, but you're not taking action, or you're not you're not taking the lead, or you're not participating in the solution. So as the Filipinos who live near the Coral Triangle and are benefited from the many advantages that coral reef offer, I have the responsibility to educate people about the coral reefs and the species that inhabit the ecosystem. And I hope that one day people will realize how important coral reefs are to Filipinos, especially on the livelihood, food security, and recreational benefits that we might get. So I will not stay long, but this is where I will end my presentation. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned a lot from my research and my report.
Almost everything humans do, from growing food to manufacturing products to generating electricity, has the potential to release pollution into the environment. Regulatory agencies charged with protecting the environment identify two main categories of pollution. These are point source and non-point source pollution. Point source pollution is easy to identify. As the name suggests, it comes from a single place. It comes from a specific, easily identifiable source that discharges directly into the water. Examples include pipes that discharge industrial pollutants and toxins directly into the water and sewage overflow. Factories and power plants can be source of point source pollution, affecting both air and water. Smokestacks may spew carbon monoxide, heavy metal, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, or particulate matter into the air. Oil refineries, paper mills, and auto plants that use water as a part of their manufacturing processes can discharge effluent, wastewater containing harmful chemical pollutants into rivers, lakes, or the ocean. Non-point source pollution, on the other hand, is the opposite of point source pollution. With pollutants released in a wide area, it is harder to identify and harder to address because it comes from many places, all at once, or it comes from a general area rather than one single source. Examples include stormwater runoff from urban areas and industry, agricultural runoff, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, atmospheric discharge of soot, like airborne materials generated from burning of various fossil fuels and toxic chemicals. Picture of a city street during a thunderstorm. There is water all around us. There are rivers, lakes, and streams near our homes, school, and work. We generate pollution with activities we do every day. We use pesticides and fertilizers in our gardens. We wash our cars on the driveway. We leave pet waste on the sidewalk. And when it rains, water runs off in surfaces like roads and driveways. The pollution is carried down storm drains and into our rivers, lakes, and oceans. When everyone pollutes a little, it adds up a lot. Polluted water can harm marine organisms and other kinds of wildlife. But you can help reduce this kind of pollution by testing the soil in your garden before adding fertilizer. Because sometimes it may not need additional nutrients. Don't use pesticides and fertilizer before it rains. Check the weather so your fertilizer doesn't get washed away. Don't wash your car on the driveway. The dirt, metals, oil, soap from washing your car on the driveway are deposited into storm drains. Instead, wash your car on the grass. The soil will filter some of the pollution before it enters our waterways. That's all. Thank you.
Coastal development is necessary to support growing populations. However, unplanned development is one of the major causes of coral reef damage. It can cause chronic sedimentation, sewage effluent, industrial discharge, changes water flow, and runoff, which can harmfully affect the ecosystems and coastal environment. The following are the causes of coral damage in line with coastal development. First, direct physical damage from the construction of pier, resorts, and airports, dredging of marinas or shipping lanes, and lands reclamation to build airports, hotels, and other infrastructures. Second, pollution from agriculture, chemicals, sewage, and other pollutants draining into the ocean. Third, sedimentation from construction and inland erosion that reaches reefs from storms and rivers.
Sedimentation. Sedimentation are suspended earth, rock, and sand particles in the water and is the leading cause of coral reef damage. One of the main impacts of coastal development has been increased in sedimentation in nearshore waters. Hence, corals cannot thrive in an environment containing high levels of sediment, which makes the water cloudy or turbid, blocking out sunlight, smothers and buries corals, and prevents juvenile corals or the planula larvae from finding a suitable substrate to colonize. Sediments are eroded soil and rock that is washed off the land by rivers and rainwater into the sea. Sediment is cold suspended when it is floating in the water column and deposited when it settles onto the seafloor. It doesn't always come on land and can also be stirred up from the ocean floor, and too much of it in a marine environment is regarded as pollutant. Sedimentation is a natural process, but many human activities make it worse. Activities such as dredging of ports in both marinas, forestry, particularly clear-cutting, agriculture, especially the plowing between crops, overgrazing of cattle and other animals, land clearance for housing, industrial development, agriculture, etc., land reclamation and shoreline filling for coastal development, clearing of mangrove forests for firewood and shrimp farms, and bottom trawling for fish. Note that marine sediment comes from the marine environment as well as from land, and the particles that have already reached the coast and settles on the seafloor can be resuspended by waves and wind. For additional information with regards to sedimentation, let's watch and learn from this video.
Hey, it's time to dish the dirt. Real dirt, not metaphorical dirt. But to talk about dirt, we need to start with soil. You may know soil from such classics as material for your garden, nutrients for your food, and footing for all kinds of fun. We need and love soil. It's full of nutrients. It fights climate change by storing carbon, and it sustains life, from the mountains into the sea. However, soil in the wrong place is just dirt. When we disturb soil too much, it goes places it doesn't belong, like rivers and streams. As the river travels, more and more dirt is added, which eventually arrives in our lakes, wetlands, estuaries, and ocean floors, and it doesn't belong there. This process is called sedimentation, and it's one of the biggest issues you've probably never heard of. See, too much dirt where it doesn't belong can cause chaos. It smothers marine life, destroys habitats, and affects feeding. Fisheries are affected by unwelcome dirt, agriculture is affected by lost dirt, and tourism is affected by our big blue backyard turning muddy. And the news gets filthier. Sedimentation itself is natural, but our actions are making it much worse. In some places, over 10 times more dirt is entering the ocean as it would naturally, which is over 7 million dump trucks worth of dirt ending up with tangaroa every single year, right here. Our marine habitats are filled with all kinds of cute, curious, and sometimes quirky creatures. They all have a part in the web of life. The well-being of Papatūānuku and Tangaroa is our well-being. So, how can we help? There are things we can do in our towns, cities, and countryside, like planting along the edge of rivers and waterways, and building and growing responsibly. But the biggest issue is that people don't know about it. So share this video and get the word out. Dish the dirt with your friends, co-workers, parents, and in-laws, so dirt stays in its place.
Tourism. Tourism, especially marine and coastal tourism, is one of the fastest growing areas within the world's largest industry. But its development negatively impacts and can gradually destroy the environmental resources on which it depends. The damaging impacts of tourism in the marine environment is primarily caused by coastal development, hotel, cruise ships, lodging and restaurant operations, and marine recreation. Tourism related to coastal construction includes development of resorts, stores, restaurants, and parking lots, the construction of piers and marinas, and the development of artificial beaches and beach replenishment leads to the physical damage of coral and reef structure, the increased sedimentation, and the increase of industrial and toxic pollution. This can greatly affect the health of coral reefs, which can in turn negatively affect the tourism industry. Hotels, cruise ships, and lodging operations create solid and liquid waste from landscaping, sewage, laundry, and other guest services. Restaurants that sell local and endangered fish and shellfish are also depleting the local marine resources and can also cause increased sedimentation, increased sewage and other land-based pollutants, and increase in destructive or overfishing of marine resources. As for marine recreation, specific activities such as snorkeling and diving can have negative effects on coral reefs, including physical damage caused by anchors and ship groundings. Divers, snorkelers, and swimmers can also cause physical damage by kicking and walking on living corals. One of the negative effects also include marine pollution from both maintenance and operation and improper sewage and garbage disposal, sedimentation from poor boating practices, divers and snorkelers, destructive and overfishing of marine resources for souvenirs, and disturbing marine life while viewing, such as turtles, whales, dolphins, and other wildlife. Uncontrolled conventional tourism poses potential threats to many natural areas around the world. The relationship of tourism with the environment is complex, for it involves many activities that can have adverse environmental effects. For additional information, let's watch and learn from the video.
Tourists may not know, but they are a threat to coral reefs. Here's some reasons why.
Coral colonies and tissues are damaged from direct contact, such as kicking, touching, swimming, or standing on the reef.
Tourists tend to leave rubbish on the beach, which then later goes into the ocean, killing animals and reef by animals eating it or getting stuck on coral.
When tourists go swimming, they tend to take shells or starfish from the ocean. Even taking pieces of coral kills the reef.
Sunblock lotion does protect you from UV rays, but the amount of nutrients in it affects our coral by creating algae blooms. Algae blooms are harmful because they create toxins in which is dangerous to both people and animals.
Here are some reasons how you can help save the reef. When When you go diving, make sure to look and don't touch. Also, do not take animals or coral away from their homes. Make sure to leave them right where you found them.
Another way to save the coral is to pick up trash around the beach when you see it, and don't litter.
Common chemical sunscreen ingredients such as oxybenzone can bleach coral and damage coral reefs. Badger does not use any of these harmful ingredients in their sunscreens, and they are safe for coral reefs.
Save our coral reef. By doing all the solutions that were provided and taking a call to action, you can save our coral reef from slowly dying.